Dr. Lee Sanderman. Thanks for being here today.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Kenneth Fung.
And as practicing psychiatrists, faculty members at the University of Toronto Department of Psychiatry, and co-founders of Mindfest, it is our pleasure to welcome you today to our keynote presentation by Michael Landsberg. We would like to begin by an acknowledgement of the land on which we work, study, and live.
We recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which the sites of the Department of Psychiatry are located that precede the establishment of the University of Toronto. So we acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And today, this land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we're really grateful to have this opportunity to live and work and gather on these territories. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with the multiple Mississaugas and the Chippewa bands.
Since this event is a virtual gathering, a singular land acknowledgement does not capture the richness of our distribution across many locations. Land acknowledgements are only a starting point for larger conversations. More concrete acts of restitution and transformation are needed to address iniquities and blatant discrimination in the distribution of resources between Canada's First People and settlers.
And also for today's events, we are very grateful to our sponsor, the Zofia Pakula Social Justice Fund, for supporting this event. It is really an honor for us to carry on Dr. Pakula's legacy of compassion and courage. You can learn more about Dr. Pakula's life and legacy at mindfest.ca.
We would also like to thank jack.org. And this year, Mindfest is an official jack.org local summit. Their support has been invaluable. Oh, everyone here today is part of something that is much larger than Mindfest. And you are helping to erase the stigma attached to mental illness and opening up conversations around mental health.
Yeah, so that's certainly the purpose of Mindfest, and we've been at it for some years now. And every year, we bring to you the most exciting speakers. And this following guest, we're super thrilled to have. He's certainly been one of our best keynote speakers before, and we're really thrilled to welcome him back, Michael Landsberg. Now, you may know him for a lifetime of hosting sports shows on TSN, and you may also know him as a mental health advocate who founded the charity Sick Not Weak, or you might not know him at all. But that's his preference, because regardless of what he's done in the past, he says
that if he doesn't impact your lives over the next hour, then he has failed you, and nothing he has done before this really matters. So please welcome Michael without any further ado.
You know, I wrote that introduction in particular because I do believe that. First of all, I think nobody cares who someone has been in the past. It makes no difference, really. If I can, over the next 90 minutes or so, if I can give you the benefit of my experience with depression and anxiety, and my experience in talking to people on a daily basis, and my experience as a layman, if I can convey something to you in the language that you would speak, then I have justified my presence in your life for the next 90 minutes. Who cares what I've done beforehand? And if I suck, if at the end of this, or if you drop off halfway and you think, well, there is nothing really of value there, you know, I didn't have, certainly wasn't entertained as Landsberg promised he would to some extent do, then who cares if I've won Academy Awards and Emmy Awards and I have a doctorate and all of that? Nothing before this matters. And when we talk about the stigma, as Kenneth was saying, and the creation of Mindfest, as Lisa was saying, I think one of the most powerful things that I can say is simply this: My name is Michael Landsberg. I battle an illness called depression and an illness called anxiety. I have suffered from anxiety since my earliest memory. It shaped to some extent my childhood. There were things that I would not do that others would do. I never talked about it because I didn't know what the hell was going on in my head, to be honest with you. No one ever talked about it. No one ever said, you know, Michael, there's this thing called general anxiety disorder. Maybe that's why you won't go to overnight camp. Maybe that's why you won't ride on a bus. And it was like, I had no awareness whatsoever that there was this thing called mental illness. And then when we started the show that I've spent most of my career doing off the record, about a year later, I fell into what I didn't know at the time was the deepest, darkest hole imaginable. And at that point, eventually, I realized something's wrong with me. I knew what was wrong with me. And that's when I took the next step, or the first step, towards getting better. So all of that, I hate it when I do that. I started off with my name is Michael Landsberg, and it was supposed to be really fast. And now I've gone off in different directions. So let me try again. My name is Michael Landsberg. I battle an illness called depression and an illness called anxiety. I'm on medication today, and I will be the rest of my life. I understand why people take their own lives. But you know what? I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. And I'm not weak. And those three last thoughts, I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed, and I'm not weak, I think are the best ones to eradicate the stigma that still keeps people in the closet, still makes people judge us, still has people denying themselves the help that they could get. There's almost no other illness with this kind of pain where we would say, I'm not going. Like no one would say, oh God, I got this terrible toothache. This could become annoying, by the way. I got this terrible toothache, but I'm not going to a doctor. No. I'm going to handle this on my own. I don't need any help. That would be absurd. No one would do that. But with mental illness, we can be totally debilitated. We can give up on our life. We can make the assumption that our lives will never get better and still say, nothing wrong with me. I don't need help. That's why we need people talking like I'm talking right now. My name is Michael Landsberg. I battle those illnesses. See, I didn't ramble this time. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. And I'm not weak.
Hello. Hi, Michael. Yeah, talking about, not embarrassed and not hiding. And I just saw a flash of something on your arm. Now that's 11/24/08 YUL MH521.0400. Wow, is that like a tattoo from your prison days, or is that a satanic cult, or what is that?
See, that is because I have gone through this many times. And you're the first person to actually make a joke and lighten things up. Good, congratulations for you. Yeah, to you. Seriously, it's not a prison tattoo. It's not a prison tattoo. What it is something that I mark on my arm. And I do it because of the significance of it. And I'm going to explain to you what 11/24/08 YUL MH521.0400 is. And it's 11/24/08, which is November the 24th, 2008. YUL, the airport code for Montreal, MH521, Marriott Hotel, room 521, 0400, 4 a.m. in the morning. That's the time in my life when I most understood why people take their own lives. I can remember sitting on the edge of the bed. I was in Montreal shooting off the record at the Grey Cup. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I don't really care if I'm alive. It wasn't that I wanted to die because I had been through this before. So unlike many, I had hope. And that word, hope, becomes one of the most important words in the mental health dictionary. So I sat there thinking, wow, I understand what it's like to really not care whether you're alive or dead, because I was in so much pain, and it had been a year and a half that I had been in that pain. And I didn't think anything of it at that time, but about a year later, when I started to feel better, Well, it wasn't a year later, when I was better, about as better as I'm going to get on medication, which I will talk about in a second, I thought to myself, wow, you know, I should mark down that date and that time and that moment, because maybe somebody else will be able to benefit from it. So that's what this is. I love saying it, okay? 112408 YULMH 5210400. How fast can you say it, Kenneth?
I cannot say it fast.
Come on, give it a shot. Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
112408 YULMH 5210400. How's that? But it's not the speed, but it's the really impact of that emotional moment.
Yeah, but you did that well. Very impressed. You know, so yeah, that was kind of the start of my journey in mental health. Was actually not that night. When I say the start of my journey, I mean the start of my public journey. So I had hosted this show since Off the Record since 1997. And in 1998 was the time when I fell into the deepest, darkest imaginable depression. You know, it was so not what I thought it was. It was like, first of all, it happened really slowly, which is really important for people watching right now who may not know whether they're okay or not, may not know whether maybe there's something better for them, because mental illness doesn't hit us like bang, like all of a sudden with a baseball bat, you get hit and you would go, oh my gosh, just got hit with a baseball bat. But depression's a tiny, tiny change, a tiny change that we don't know is happening to us. And as a result, you can be really sick like I was and not put it all together. But when I realized after putting it all together that there was something wrong with me, I knew it was depression. And I wanted to go to everyone that I had ever judged before and say, I'm so sorry for the things I was thinking. I thought that somehow this was a weakness. I thought that somehow you were to blame for your problem. And I didn't show you the right sympathy. And I didn't accept it as an illness like I would have accepted if you had cancer. I'm so sorry for that. Of course, I didn't go around apologizing to people, but that's what I learned from the recognition of what I was experiencing was depression, 1,000,000 times worse than I ever thought. So a year later, I started to, when I had felt better, I was interviewing a guest named Stéphane Richer. And in preparation for that, he's a two-time Stanley Cup champion, former Montreal Canadian. In preparation for that, I had seen and read moments before I actually went down to the green room. I had read that he had battled depression in the 1990s. So I thought, okay, I'm going to ask him about that. I had never spoken about my mental health challenges on TV, not because I was ashamed or embarrassed, because I wasn't. People in my life knew. I just thought no one's going to care. They'll go, oh yeah, Landsberg knows a lot of people hate him on TV. So now he just wants us to like him. So he wants our sympathy. So I had never spoken about it. But I thought this would be an interesting question for Stéphane. So I said, Stéphane, can you come out of the green room for a second? And he said, sure, what's up? I said, look, you've never met me before. You don't owe me anything. But would it be okay if I asked you how you're doing with depression? And he said, well, you know, it's very painful for me to talk about. And I said, hey, I'm glad I asked you in advance because I don't want to cause you any pain. But if you'll talk about it, I'll talk about it. And he said, you? And I said, yeah, me. And he said, you? And I said, yeah, me. And he said, what are you? Like what? I said, well, you know, Stéphane, haven't you realized that people like you and me can fool people, that you can wear the mask, that you can think that everything is perfect in my life, and yet I can be suffering from severe depression like you put on the mask? And he said, absolutely, let's go do it. So we were going to the third commercial, and I said, hey, Stéphane, before we go to break, I just wanted to know, true that you suffered depression in the 90s and still do? Yes. How did that impact your hockey career? And he said, it was a little bit more than this, but to be very succinct about it, he said, imagine a Canadian kid born in Montreal, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, rookie of the year in the NHL for the Canadiens, last Montreal Canadian to score 50 goals, win the Stanley Cup for the Montreal Canadiens. And none of that brought me a moment of joy. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's depression right there. None of it brought me a moment of joy. And he said, think of this. I was on the ice with the Stanley Cup, and all I wanted to do was be back in my hotel room, in bed, away from everyone. And I thought, I said to him, wow, that is like such a great explanation of something that I've experienced. Without the wild successes that you've had, I experienced exactly the same thing, you know, this loss of the ability to experience joy. And I'm doing better now, but I'm coming off the worst year and a half of my life, and I'm doing better now. So, you know, I'm just kind of here to say, hey, thank you, whomever invented the medication. I guess it was Eli Lilly and Prozac. Thank you. And I thought that was it. I didn't think afterwards that, wow, you know, we just made a difference in people's lives. I just thought that was actually a pretty interesting 2 minutes of television. Television is at its best when you learn things about people and when you learn things. So I thought that was pretty good. But what changed my life, Lisa, is that when the show went to air, we started getting emails. When that moment happened, that 2 minutes, it was probably about 6:22. And I started getting emails. And these were not like anything I'd ever seen before. And if you could have summed them up, they would have read almost exactly like this, because they were almost exactly all the same. Hey, Michael, watching you and Stefan Richer talking about your depression was the first time in my life that I've heard two men talking about depression, or two people just talking casually about it without shame and embarrassment and without sounding weak. And because of that, I'm sharing with you that I have battled depression for 5 years or 10 years. And now you're the first person I've ever told. And now I'm going to go for help, because I thought, hey, those guys don't sound like total losers. They don't sound weak. So maybe if they can do it, I can do it. And that's kind of what changed my life. And now I have not shut up about it, I don't think, since that time in 2009.
So glad you're talking so much about your experiences. So now I have a simpler question for you, I hope. Where is my casserole?
See, where is my casserole? Obviously, I told you to ask that. By the way, Fresca is an underrated, refreshing drink. If you're giving long talks and you want that drink beside you to give you a little extra boost, Fresca is the thing. And I'm not sponsored by Fresca. I'm not sponsored by anyone, actually. I'm my own man. I haven't sold out to the man. Where's my casserole? I kind of thought of that because, so here I am, a guy with a mental health challenge. And let's say, hypothetically, I had spent time at CAMH, which many people I know have spent time at CAMH and other psychiatric facilities because they needed constant care or because they were a risk to themselves. And I got out of the hospital after 3 months. I would say this: where's my casserole? Because if I was in the hospital for 3 months with a heart condition and had open heart surgery, people would be lined up at my door with casseroles saying, oh, we know you got home. I'm sure it's very difficult for you to cook right now. Here's a nice casserole. But when it comes to depression or anxiety or any of the other mental illnesses, and people know that's what is suffering, that's what you're suffering for, nobody offers a casserole. And just don't get the wrong idea, Lisa. Don't come down the street with a casserole, because they're kind of disgusting. Like the tuna casserole, oh, warm tuna is terrible. But you get the point. People say, here's a nice casserole when you have a physical illness. Can I ask you a question, Lisa?
Sure.
Why do we call it mental illness? And let me sort of put on the explanation for why I ask that. Is that, I spend most of my time trying to convince people that depression is a physical illness of the brain. So why is Parkinson's a brain disease and depression is a mental illness?
That's a very good question. I think, there's a lot that we look at in psychiatry as biopsychosocial. So we do look at the biological, the psychological, and the social aspects when we're assessing patients and coming up with a treatment plan for any disorders. So all of those things have to be considered.
I don't like the term. Do you like the term?
There's a lot of terms that are problematic, but they also come from history of Western medicine and Western science. And so the separation of mind and body idea of Descartes might be one of the ways that kind of came about.
What terms do you prefer, Michael?
I would say brain disease. I would say, and I know I have a friend who's an ophthalmologist in in Rochester, I think. And he was saying in the hospital that he worked at before that, he was actually at Sick Kids, and that's how I met him through my daughter. And he was saying, we don't call it depression anymore, or anxiety, or schizophrenia. We call it brain disease. And I think that's better, just because the idea of saying the words mental health to describe, or mental illness to describe what it is I have experienced in my life, I think it leaves people thinking that somehow it is different than Parkinson's. And when I say different, I don't mean that they're the same thing, but they are, their basis is different. And I know we don't know exactly what causes depression. We used to think it was a chemical imbalance. When I say we, I'm talking about, experts like the three of us, you, me, you, Kenneth, and Lisa, and I. I think that you've moved away from that to some extent, but still there's something in my brain when I like in 112408 YUL MH5210400, there was something physically wrong in my brain. And I think if you call it a mental illness, people make the assumption that somehow it's self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There may be a lot of assumptions about that. So what do you think about the term healthy brainitis then?
Oh, healthy brainitis. Now, I know you probably read that in a medical textbook. I'm very pleased that you said
That's
that.
the last one you authored by Michael Landsberg.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for, I'm glad you read that. I invented this, well, I figured I could name the illness, right? Because that's what happens. I mean, I imagine Parkinson's was named by some dude named Parkinson, right? Am I right by that? And Alzheimer's was named by someone with the last name Alzheimer's. Well, I'm naming it healthy brainitis. Now think about this logic. Go with me on this. Healthy brainitis is a sickness of the non-depressed brain. So if your healthy brain is sick, then it's not a healthy brain. But in this case, the health of the brain is the sickness, because the healthy brain is paralyzed when it comes to understanding sickness. Therefore, healthy brainitis is a sickness of the healthy brain, also known as the arrogance of the healthy brain. And you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, what the hell is he talking about? And okay, what are the symptoms of this? Well, you suffer from healthy brainitis if, number one, you believe that you know how something like depression feels. That's why you say we all go through it sometimes. And I'm here to say we don't all go through it sometimes. We all go through problems in our life. We all have down periods in our life, but we don't all have these mental illnesses. You believe that you know how it feels because we use the same words to describe something like depression as we do a bad time in our life, a downtime. We use the word anxiety, the illness, just like we use the word I'm anxious because I have an exam coming up. They are not the same. Symptom number two, you believe you know how to treat it. And that's why it's so hard to be a caregiver to someone like me with this illness, because you think to yourself, I know how to treat this because and I'll tell you symptom three in a second, because I've been through it myself. And that's when you say things like, why don't you go for a nice walk? Or, hey, what do you have to be depressed about? All of that stem from the idea that you think that you can help us because you think you know how it feels. And symptom number three, you believe you've actually suffered from it. Because of your remarkable strength, you believe that you have actually been through the same things as me. You've woken up. This is what you say to yourself. I heard that guy Landsberg talking about depression and, how tough it's been for him at times. Well, I've been through tough times too. Hey, I remember when I was in second year at U of T, I realized I didn't want to be at U of T. I wanted to be at Ryerson. That was actually my life. But you think to yourself, hey, but I was down about that, hey, but I didn't have to go to a doctor. I didn't need medication. I'm strong. I have willed my way out of depressions. Michael could not. He is weak. So that's healthy brainitis. And the only treatment for it is to stop being a jerk. And then you won't experience it. So yeah, you had read about that, Kenneth? Is that true?
Yes. And really learn a lot from the syndrome of healthy brainitis.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I see you. Feel free to use it, right? You know what? We're all in this together. And if I can be of assistance in your practice and your teaching, then that's a good thing.
Certainly the uniqueness of each person's experience, right? That each of us go through this in a very personal way.
Okay, which leads me into the next, and this is obviously not scripted, but I think that obviously an illness like depression, and that's what I talk about the most because that's what I know the best. And I think you'll notice throughout my entire talk that I stay in my lane the whole time. I'm never talking about something where you go, well, wow, I mean, he's not a doctor. Why is he talking about that? Or, he hasn't experienced that. Like, I can't talk about schizophrenia. I mean, I can talk about how debilitating it can be from what I've heard from others, but I haven't been through it. So shame on me if I talk like I have. I understand depression from the inside out. I understand anxiety from the inside out. I understand ADHD from the inside out. And if you think to yourself, oh my God, that guy is talking so fast and he's talking so long, it's unbelievable. I'm here to tell you today is a Vyvanse day. So yeah, I'm unstoppable at this point. But when you said what you said, I agree with it. There's something personal about an illness like depression. To some extent, they affect all of us differently because all of us have different lives and all of us have different coping mechanisms. But there's also, to me, 4 things that we all have in common. People with depression, serious depression. So when I talk about it, I'm not talking about, sort of mild seasonal depression, not to besmirch people with mild seasonal depression, but it's not the same as, debilitating, devastating, I can't get out of bed depression. So I think that there's some things we all have in common. And back in the day when I used to give these talks face to face, I would ask this question very often. I would say, how many of you, please raise your hand, have not experienced depression the way I'm going to describe I've experienced it? That doesn't mean that your life is the same as my life, but it means that you felt the same things. There's 4 things, and no one's ever raised their hands. Not one time has anyone said, no, not me. There's 2 principal things that we all battle. Number 1, the loss of the ability to experience joy. I first heard that when Stéphane Richer said, imagine a Canadian kid, I win the Stanley Cup, I'm on the ice and I just want to get back to bed. Imagine I never felt any joy from playing hockey. And I thought, oh my God, that was my life for a year and a half before 11/24/08. Notice I didn't go through the whole thing. I thought, you know what, it's cool, it sounds good, gives me a little swagger, but people are getting tired of it. So I thought, yeah, I remember filing it away. And now here I am, I guess it would be 13 years later, and I have never met someone who has severe depression, who has not experienced the loss of the ability to experience joy. It is universal. It's almost a definition of depression. If you go, oh, no. If you think, if you say, yeah, you know what, when something good happens, I can feel joy, but when I wake up in the morning, I don't. That's not the same thing as what I'm talking about. This is not about whether you have good things in your life. If someone gives you $6 million and you have severe depression, you think to yourself, this is good. I'll have security. I'll have everything that I wanted to have. I can give the money to my kids, all of that. I can buy a house, everybody's dream, but you won't feel the joy that comes from it. There's a big difference between awareness that something's good and feeling that it's something's good. And that's universal. So regardless of how your life has been affected by depression, I bet you have experienced that loss of the ability to experience joy. Number 2 would be loss of self-esteem. Now, this is one that people don't talk a lot about. And this is one that I think makes me a really good advocate for mental health sharing, because I have always been perceived as being cocky, which I've always been okay with, right? Cocky just seems to me you got kind of a fun bounce in your step and you believe in yourself, but you don't necessarily take yourself seriously. But also people perceive me as being arrogant because of how I came across on television all the time. And I'm like, the only thing I'll brag about is not being arrogant, which is kind of weird because by bragging about it, it makes me sound like I'm arrogant, but I'm not in any way. I've never treated anyone any differently than the next person because of their station in life. So when you have this perception of me of being cocky and arrogant, and then I tell you I battled depression, now you are challenged. Either he's lying because he just wants us to like him, or maybe depression is not the weakness that I thought it was. Maybe also people can mask what they're experiencing, which takes you to the next level, which is maybe that person I care about, that I worry about, maybe they're not doing as well as I thought they were doing. Because I watched that jackass Landsberg on television, and man, he says he was severely depressed, and I could never tell. He always thought that he knew everything. And so I think that kind of gives me an advantage, at least in the short term, when it comes to talking about mental illness and the loss of self-esteem. We all go through it. So here's me today. If you could get in my head, and it's not like people think like this, but I would be thinking, hey, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm really glad that Lisa asked me to do this. I'm glad that there'll be an interested audience. It's not like people are forced to be here. Like when I go give a corporate speech and they're told, hey, at lunch, you got to come and hear Landsberg speak. It's not. I spoke once to, or a couple of times to Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, the union. And there was 1,500 people. They split them into 750 and 750. And I thought, oh my God, this is like, oh, I have made it, man. Oh, 1,500 people showed up to see me and hear me speak. And then I said, this is great. Thank you for coming out. By the way, did you have to come out? And they go, yeah, it's a PD day. We were expected to be here. It was like, no, I wanted to believe that you all showed up for me. But I don't even know where I was with that. So here's the self-esteem thing. And this is where that just came from. So beforehand, I was thinking, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to getting to be myself. And the reason why I was looking forward to it is that I feel good today. Today is, on the depression scale for me, is a 7. A 0 is the worst imaginable day. That would have been for me 11/24/08. A 10 is not euphoria, because euphoria is, feeling euphoric has nothing to do, it should have nothing to do with mental illness. It should be the circumstances around you. So you should, I think perfect mental health means you can experience whatever life is tossing at you, right? If you lose someone that you love, you should feel really low. And if you have something amazing happen, then you should feel really high. That's mental health. But mental illness for me is in this narrow range of 4 to 7 because of medication. Please feel free to ask me that question. I'm talking to you, Kenneth. So today I feel good. So I'm thinking to myself, can't wait to get on. Let's do this thing. I was on this call at a half hour early, and it was because I'm pumped for it. But on a bad day, I'd be thinking to myself, God, why did I say I would do this? I hate doing this. Oh no, I'm going to go on, and these people are going to be looking and going, well, that was a waste of time. And no, you know what? He thinks he's so funny with his little jokes about mental illness. That's the loss of self-esteem that all of us experience differently in our lives. Like, why would you experience a loss of self-esteem when it comes to public speaking if you don't public speak? But whatever it is you do in your life that you are confident in because you know you can do it well, add depression to the mix, and all of a sudden you lose that confidence, and it can be devastating. I'll just say these next two really quickly. Loneliness, that feeling that I'm the only one. I just, no one else could know what I feel. And that comes a lot because of the stigma, because a lot of people feel this is their own fault, right? They've created this in their head. They have somehow allowed this to happen to themselves. We all feel this sense of loneliness. And that's why I say, grab a pen and pencil, because this one's good. This little saying, I think, is so important for people like me with this illness, and maybe like you. Loneliness is never about the number of people around us. It's having one person who understands us. It's not about the number of people around us. It's the number of people, even just one, who understand us. So you can be in a room, you can be at a wedding. I remember going to a wedding for someone in my wife's family, and I felt like I was all alone, even though there was 200 people there. Actually, there was 400. We Jews have big weddings, okay? There was 400 people there, and I thought I was all alone. And I actually went to the washroom and stood in there just to get away from everyone, because I thought, I'm by myself. I'm on an island. So one person at that wedding out of 400 who would have given me a nod saying, hey, how you doing? I know, I'm going through the same thing as you, would have changed my evening. It's not about the number of people around us. It's the number of people who understand us. And the fourth thing is that feeling of hopelessness, which is devastating for people who really have depression bad. You lose the hope that you'll ever get better. I think one of the things that depression does is it makes us pessimists. You know, I don't know if that's a described symptom, but we catastrophize everything. We think that everything is going to work out in the worst possible way. So when you are hopeless, you're thinking, I'm never getting better. And when you say, I can't live with this pain for very much longer, then you're a real risk to yourself. Those are four things that I know I have experienced with depression that most people have. Lise.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Next question is to explain bath or baseball bat.
Bath or baseball bat. See, I touched on that before. I said, you know, when I got depression for the first time, it didn't happen like a baseball bat hit me. It was like I was in the bath and there were these tiny incremental changes, tiny changes to the temperature of the bath. And, you know, it started out really nice and warm. In fact, like a little bit hot. And then after 7 minutes, random time, I thought to myself, this isn't warm anymore. It's not comfortable anymore. It's kind of cool. Well, I didn't notice it changing. They were tiny, tiny changes that when you add it up, eventually I noticed the change. And that's what happened with me in depression back in 1998 for the first time. I realized one day when I was invited by a friend to go screen a movie because Vin Diesel was a guest on Off the Record the next day. By the way, I can name drop with the best of them. And like, what could be more fun than going to see a movie and interviewing the guy the next day? And I said to my friend, the producer, Bob, I said, no, I can't go. Sorry, I have a family obligation. He said, okay, see you at work tomorrow, whatever. And I thought to myself when I hung up, why did I do that? Why would I say no? And then I thought about all the things I had said no to, all the times I had avoided being around anyone. I had become the opposite of who I was. I had attempted to be reclusive as much as you can be reclusive when you have a family and when you have a full-time job, and when your full-time job means that you're going to be around people. So I started to forensically evaluate my own life back in the previous 6 months. And then it hit me, my God, I'm sick. And I know what I have. I know I have depression. And there's part of that story that's really important because I went to my family doctor right away. And my family doctor, who I loved, adored, he retired a couple of years ago. I'm in the market for a family doctor. And he said, I told him my experience. He said, oh, you know, I watch you sometimes on TV. You don't seem like you're depressed. And I thought, I didn't think about it at the time, but now I would go, well, you know, haven't you learned that you can't tell that, you know, people who you don't think are depressed take their own lives? And people say, I had no idea. But what I did say to him was, you know, I'm not the same guy I was. And he said, you know, do more fun things, go to the gym, you know, that kind of thing, and you'll be fine, because you don't want to start with medication or anything like that. And I left, and I knew that that was not good advice. And 3 months later, when I was even sicker, I called, I don't know, do you guys know Dr. Danielle Thomas? She is a psychiatrist, not assuming that all psychiatrists know each other, but she was at U of T and has actually practiced down at U of T treating students with I guess a kind of walk-in situation. So my buddy Bob had been treated by her and said she was great. So I got her phone number from him and I called her. It was her cell phone. And I said, hi, Dr. Thomas. I know I probably have broken protocol. I shouldn't be calling you. My name is Michael Landsberg, not that that's relevant, and I need help. And she said, well, you know, like, there is a procedure here. You go through your family doctor. And I said, I understand that. I went to my family doctor. It didn't get me anywhere. I know that there's a really long waiting list. And I'm telling you that I'm in a position now where I'm in a terrible place. And it's like I've given up my life to my illness. I am not living. I'm just walking and breathing. I'm like a mechanical machine. And she said, come in and see me next Tuesday or something like that, but get your GP or your family doctor to make a referral. And that changed my life because she ended up helping me and treating me for the next, I guess, 10 years, maybe, until she wasn't counseling me anymore. She was just filling prescriptions, which you could obviously have someone else do. So Dr. Danielle Thomas, thank you very much. I don't even remember what the question was. What was the question?
Talking about, as you're trying to remember, but I think it did start with like a hot bath.
Oh,
But
right. So
ranging from hot bath to a hot
right.
oven, how's the pizza?
See, how's the pizza is a good question, because I love metaphors. Because, you know, if a scientist like you, Kenneth, or Lisa, gets up and starts to talk about depression and how there are physical changes in us, and talks in a language that other doctors would understand, it's very difficult for someone to understand. But the reason why I can be effective doing this is because I talk like a patient, because I am a patient. And metaphors can be a really good way to explain sometimes a thought that is very difficult to express. Our brain, our language does not allow us all the time to get the thoughts from here and get them out of our mouth. So metaphors can be really good. And this is my metaphor with pizza. So let's say you're battling depression. And I want you to understand how I have lost the ability to experience joy. Well, you can't understand that because it's inconceivable. Because with your healthy brain, if someone does something good for you that brings you joy, you can feel joy. And that's why you think, okay, well, you know, if I buy that person with depression a nice gift, or send them flowers, or tell them to go for a nice dinner, or all of those things, that's why you say those things. So my explanation would be, think of it this way. You know, when you have a cold and you can't smell and you can't taste, but you say, man, I'm feeling really crappy today, especially men, because men whine about colds more than women, but I feel so terrible. And then, you know, maybe your partner in life says, hey, you know, I'm going to get you a pizza from your favorite place, and that'll make you feel better. And then you take a bite of the pizza and you go, I can't taste it. Well, you still like the pizza. The pizza is still good, but you can't taste it. Why? Because you've lost the ability to taste. That's depression. That's what happens to all of us when we experience this illness. So no matter how many great things you do for us, which is awesome. I'm not telling you don't be nice to people with depression, but don't expect that your niceness will be a treatment for the depression. So thanks for reminding me that. And thanks for asking that question. Go ahead, ask something else while I take a sip of this refreshing Fresca.
So when we chatted before, we know that you like hashtags. So
I do.
Tell us about Proud of the Shower.
Proud of the Shower, a favorite one, because to me, everything has got to rhyme or be an alliteration, right? It just makes them easier to remember, and they just sound way cooler. Proud of the Shower. So when I have conversations with people, which I do every single day, I mean, usually in text or on DM or on some other electronic text way, you know, it's not like I'm on the phone with people all the time. But, you know, I talk to people and they ask me, you know, for advice sometimes because they know I've been in their position, not because my advice is necessarily better than the next person's, but I've been through it and I get to express it. And so what, you know, when I say to them, look, you're in a really bad place right now. You know, you're beating yourself up over it. You've found it so difficult to do anything, including just getting out of bed or taking a shower, that when you do that successfully, you have to be celebrating it, right? Because, you know, treatment and successful treatment doesn't come with like one dose of a medication or with an operation where all of a sudden you feel better. It's a slow process. And that process is slow enough that if you are only going to celebrate when you're 100% better, first of all, you'll probably never get 100% better, but you'll be waiting a long time. So be proud of the little steps you take. The bar for you is so much lower than it is for the person you sit beside at work who doesn't have depression, because that small thing like taking a shower can be a huge accomplishment for you. It's like, you know, Neil Armstrong, when he landed on the moon, he said, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The shower is one small step for another man, one giant leap for our kind. And I think that if you look at the shower, because people use that word all the time, right? Oh, God, I couldn't even take a shower. It's kind of like that's one of the markers for depression. If you take it, then you got to celebrate it. And especially to someone like me who understands that. I mean, if you go into work and you go, oh my God, everybody, I took a shower, they probably wouldn't understand it, but I do.
So is this in line with Fight for Your Happiness then?
Yeah, you know what? One of the first things after after that show with Stefan Richer, and I started to have to be asked questions from people who found out all of a sudden that we were in a very similar position. And they found it very difficult to find people to talk to who would understand them on a non-medical level. I remember that there's a few things that I would always put in an email back to them. And one of them was fight for your happiness. If you don't, who will and who can? And if you are committing to the fight for your happiness, you have to be ready for failure. You have to know going in that this is not an easy illness to treat, that if you want to go for counseling and therapy, you can go to different doctors and have no success. And the only way that you're going to get better in most cases is if you say, I am committed to the fight. I will never quit. I will keep doing this. And I can tell you that that's incredibly difficult, because one of the things that depression does is it sucks the life out of us, right? I mean, people say, I want to sleep all day long. And it's like you are in need of the greatest strength of your life to fight this illness, and yet you have no energy for anything. It's like you're lying in your bed and depression has its foot on your head and is telling you to get up and fight. And it's really hard to do. So fight for your happiness may sound pretty basic, but behind that is the idea that you got to commit to it, and you got to know that it's not going to be easy. And if you care about someone who has something like depression, and they go to their family doctor, and their family doctor puts them on 20 milligrams of Cipralex or escitalopram. I'm just saying that to show you guys that, you know, I am a bit of a psychopharmacological expert here, because I've been on many of them. You know, says after a month, I'm not doing any better. I'm actually worse, because I have side effects and I've got no relief from my illness at all. That's so dispiriting. And that's when you, as someone who cares about that person, need to fight like hell to get them back for the next treatment, to try something else. Not necessarily after a month, but after 6 months. You know, I say to people all the time, hey, you've been on the same medication for 6 months and you're no better. You got to go back to your doctor, or you got to find a new doctor, because at a certain point, why are you taking meds if it's not doing anything for you? So you have to get into people's head the idea that this could be an ongoing battle. And that's one of the best things a caregiver can do, is to continually say, okay, you can't give up, even though you want to give up.
So I win because I fight, right?
Yeah, I win because I choose to fight. I think I abbreviated it for the hashtag. You know, it gets back to the idea that if the only satisfaction you're going to get out of the fight against your illness and for your happiness is going to be, you know, defeating the illness, you're not going to have a lot of self-satisfaction. And I can tell you that in a really bad day for me, if I am able to do anything on that day, then I need to celebrate it. And if I'm able to do the things in my day that I was expected to do, even though they're incredibly painful and difficult for me, then I need to be able to say, hey, you know what? I have won the day simply because I chose to fight. So winning the day is not always about getting better on that day, but just saying, you know, I'm going to take a shower, or I'm going to get out of bed, or I'm going to work. I mean, I kind of built that thought on going to work every day with this really crappy illness. And I said to myself, never said it to anyone else, well, you know, I've won the day because I didn't give in, because I continued to fight this thing.
So is that also live to live?
Yeah, live to live is, you know, to somebody who's really in bad shape, you know, you can tell they may not be suicidal, or they may be, but that they are just really down about the constant battle against depression. You know, I kind of say, I mean, I don't usually use the little live to live. I usually say it in different words, but it's like, well, you know, people would say, well, why am I fighting this? What's the point? And the point is, you're not fighting so you can live in pain the way you are right now. You're fighting this so you can live the way you want to live. So you are living to live. And even though you don't feel it right now, you will in the future. And that's a tough thing to convince people of. You know, I have a guy I went to Forest Hill with, Forest Hill Collegiate, Dan Greben, psychiatrist. Either one of you know Dan Greben? You do? Okay, so I saw him when in the last house I lived in until 6 months ago. I was walking my dog, and I went to high school with Dan Graven, and we're talking about mental health. We're talking about depression in particular. And I said to him, it's so hard to convince people who've been through something, some kind of treatment, to continue. And he said, that's so true. He said, almost everyone I can help in some way. But most people will give up, or many people will want to give up before you can try all of the options with them. And that's what you need to tell this person that you sleep beside. And that's that, hey, you know what? You're not living now. You're not staying alive now so you can live like this the rest of your life, because who would want to? You're living like this so you can live in the future.
So there's change is hope, right?
Change is hope is, what do you think it means? I mean, you would have no reason to know, and it's not obvious. I just want to see if it actually does convey through the words what it is.
I think, first of all, there's always hope, and every little change that you're able to make each day will give new hope. And if you do the same thing, that's when you get stuck.
Absolutely. The second part was going to be the second part of what I said, that, you say to people, or at least I do, hey, if you've been doing the same thing every day for the last 5 years, and every day has been torturous for you, I can pretty well promise you when you wake up tomorrow morning, you're going to feel the same way. I mean, you have to come to the conclusion at a certain point that it's not going away on its own. I can't will it away. I can't get stronger and believe that I'm stronger and therefore get rid of it. You need to change something. Because since you've been doing the same thing every day, and since you feel crappy every single day, you have become hopeless. You are assuming that tomorrow morning you are going to feel the way you feel right now. So you have to change something. And for most people who are starting the battle, that is making an appointment with their family doctor. You pick up the phone and dial those digits and make an appointment. And all of a sudden now you will feel some hope. And if you've been through it, and if you've had treatment and it hasn't worked, or it did and it stopped working, and you feel hopeless again, make the appointment to restart your fight. And that's why, I say you got to change something, whatever it is, educate yourself on depression. That's a change. Go to the health food store if you want, and, find some supplements. It's not necessarily my first choice, but at least that's a change. At least there's a reason why you can say, well, tomorrow morning, maybe I'll be better because I started taking, 5-HTP or SAMe, or I'm trying to think of the other ones that I tried when I was desperate. So that's what changes hope is. Any questions that we have seen in the chat?
Yes, we've got a few questions.
Look who's here. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, Ben from Toronto. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Awesome. Just a quick introduction. I'm the communications coordinator in the Department of Psychiatry and part of the Mindfest team. And without further ado, our first question from the audience. Hi, Michael. Could you still function at work on TSN with your depression? Did your work lose satisfaction for you?
Okay, ask me that in two parts. So ask me the first part again. Could I function? Yes, I could function. I didn't miss any shows, but that is not a boast about how strong I am. Even though I would put that, I would say, hey, instead of thinking that people like me are weak, you should think how strong we are because of what it takes to do the same things that you do that you find easy. So I continued to work, not because I wanted to, but because I thought it was mandatory for me in a job like I had, that I couldn't just say, okay, well, I'm not coming in today or not coming in next week. And I also knew for my worst times that staying home wasn't going to help me anyway, right? It would have satisfied me that I, didn't have to go and talk to people and be social, but I hated all of it. And then what was the second question?
Did your work lose satisfaction?
Did my work bring satisfaction? And the answer is 0, because I thought my work was terrible. See, that's symptom number 2 of depression, loss of self-esteem. So I thought everything I did was terrible. I measured every little word that came out of my mouth and critiqued it. I just thought, everyone's going to see me for what I am, which is, a crappy broadcaster. And I can tell you that the only satisfaction I ever got was the drive home. And then it got painful again, because then I would walk in to my home for the people I love or with the people I love. And I felt like, oh my gosh, you know, now I have to talk. Now I can't do what I want to do, which is just get away and isolate from everyone. So no, I didn't get any satisfaction.
Another question. How do you help someone who refuses to accept they're depressed?
Oh my God, that's the hardest. I mean, first of all, that question is there's like 3 questions I could guarantee you that someone's going to ask because they're really difficult to answer. And we all ask them. You care about this person, and your natural reaction is to go to them and say, hey, Michael, you don't seem like yourself lately. And me being Michael with the depression, I go, no, I'm fine. You go, no, I don't think you're fine. It's like, no, I think I'm good. I would know if I wasn't good. And I know perhaps that I'm not good, but I'm not giving in because I don't want to be perceived as weak. I don't want to be seen as having this, you know, mental illness, because my perception based on the stigma is that strong people don't get like this. So I am pretending, or I'm lying. And then, you know, you come back up with, next time you see me, whatever the circumstances, you say, you know, I asked you yesterday whether you're okay. I don't think you are okay, because, you know, you don't do the same things you used to do. You don't have that same joy that you used to have. And then I go, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that we had to be joyful all the time. Maybe my life's a little bit more difficult than yours. That's the battle that you face. And it's really difficult to crack. And I have a couple of suggestions. Number one is the attempt to make this person understand that you don't see them as weak if they admit maybe they have a problem. And number two, make your questions rhetorical. And here's what I mean. So let's say I was talking to Lisa about, no, it should be to you, Ken. I'm talking to you and I'm saying, hey, Ken, I know you keep denying that you're okay, but I want to say to you this. I want to ask you these questions, and don't answer these questions, but answer them to yourself. I don't want to hear the answers because I know what you're going to say. But ask yourself, are you the same person that you were a year ago when I thought that you were feeling okay because you were the same guy that I always knew? You were Ken. Ask yourself, are you the same guy? Ask yourself the things that used to bring you joy. I call it the basic joy test. This one little thing in my life that I do that brings me joy. Not a big thing, but just something that happens every day that I go, hey, yeah, I like that. That's why I did that. Sip of coffee in the morning. It brings me joy when I'm not depressed. And when I'm depressed, nothing brings me joy. So ask yourself, a year ago, the things that you did, or one thing that you did that brought you joy, does it still bring you joy? In fact, build on that question. When was the last time you actually felt joy? Don't answer to me, because I know you're going to say all kinds of things that might be lies. Answer to yourself. And if the answer is, yeah, you know, I'm not getting the same joy out of my life. If the answer is no, I have changed, then you owe it to yourself to get help, to pursue it, because you're giving up on your life. Because I can tell you that you can have severe depression, you can live for 40 years, but you cannot be alive for 40 years. There's a difference between just living and being alive. So that's what I would do. No guarantees that it works.
Thank you, Michael. We have a few people asking about frustrations with trying to move forward when doctors aren't helping, when doctors don't necessarily believe that someone's depressed, or you know, the person, like you were talking about earlier, they present as being functional or happy, and doctors are more reluctant to assist them.
You know, it's, well, let's just face it. Doctors suck. You suck, Kenneth. You suck, Lisa. Everybody else, you suck. I was giving a speech in Hamilton at, I don't remember where it was. And it was me and a family doctor talking. And this was a family doctor who had an interest in psychiatry and mental health. And he said it, not me. He said it. He said, the stigma around mental illness is at its worst in a family doctor's office. And he said, not all, like he's not painting everyone with the same brush, but there is the lack of urgency that we experience when someone comes in and says, you know, I'm not feeling like myself. Well, that's a referral to a psychiatrist that could take 10 months or 11 months. If you go into that doctor and you say, oh man, I got this pain here. And every time I walk up the stairs, oh, my chest is killing me. And he takes or she takes your blood pressure and it's high, and then sends you for blood tests and it comes back and your cholesterol is terrible. How long is it going to take to get in to see a cardiologist? You know, a day, maybe, or maybe he'll just send you right from there to the hospital. The sense of urgency when someone says, I'm not living anymore, I'm just going through the motions, is not there. And I think because the stigma still has people thinking, okay, yeah, you know, he's not happy, but he's not really sick. That idea that happiness is based on a lack of sickness and being unhappy is based on a sickness doesn't sound like medicine. It kind of sounds like, you know, maybe you got to get a new job. So it's very difficult to convince to somebody who may believe that you do need help. And also, we are wired to. Okay, Kenneth, or not Kenneth, Ben, say to me, "How you doing?" And I'll show you how people tend to answer. How you doing?
How are you doing, Michael?
Well, you know, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, you know, and if you were my family doctor, I might say I'm doing pretty good, but I'm here because, you know, I'm not doing great. You know, I would minimize people, you know, like the world is divided into people who like to complain and inflict their illnesses and their pain on other people. They feel that it gives them a certain status to express their pain. But many of us are minimizers, right? Oh, well, you know, doc, I'm here because I'm just not feeling great. You know I have nothing really to complain about. I have a great family and a great job, but I just don't feel like myself. Well, I'm not giving that doctor the benefit of really understanding what's going on in my head. I think what you need to do is you need to be explicit with it. And if you're going to err on the side of being totally open and the seriousness of it. And if you say, you know, I don't necessarily like being alive right now, which doesn't mean that you want to die. It means that you're not enjoying anything about your life. That gives them the best possible chance.
So I guess communications is so important with your healthcare providers to work out some of these challenges.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because Kenneth, you know, when you meet with people, you know what questions to ask, right? I mean, that's what your specialty is. You know how to get the answers that you need to make a diagnosis. But, you know, the family doctor who knows tons that you don't know, right? You know, you don't know necessarily what to prescribe for strep throat. Maybe you do, but if you have kids, you probably do. But you know what I'm saying. So you know how to ask the questions, and the patient doesn't have to do the work with you, right? I mean, part of you is reading between the lines when someone says something, but don't expect that your family doctor can do that, and don't expect that they're going to make the right treatment option based on a diagnosis that may not be correct if you don't give them the necessary information.
Now, I also noticed one of the questions in the chat for you is, what are some things that you wish someone had said to you when you were in your darkest days?
I wish someone would have said, hey, you know, Michael, I have to try to figure out in the circumstances, you know, have I shared with everyone? I think in the 6 months that I was in denial, probably longer than that, it would have been great if someone said to me, you know, you may not know this about you, but, you know, you don't seem like you're the same guy. You know, you walk into a room, but you don't bounce into a room. You know, like you'll smile, but it doesn't look like a genuine smile. You know, are you okay? And I wouldn't have got defensive. I would have said, kind of know what you mean. And maybe that would have got me, you know, to make that panic call to Dr. Thomas a little bit earlier. But then, you know, when I came out with this to my friends and family and people that I work with, it would have felt really good to have someone describe what they were feeling and have me realize that I was feeling the same thing. Because as I said before, it's not about how many people are around you, it's how many people understand you. That would have made a difference in my life.
And what about when people know that you're depressed, you have disclosed, and you're feeling really down in the dumps? What would you appreciate hearing from them? You know,
I mean, I'm kind of in a different circumstance than most because I was never wired to feel any shame, right? Like I mean, look at me. I'm you know, basically, you know, walking down the street going, hey, I've got major depressive disorder. I've also battled anxiety. I'm on Cipralex and Wellbutrin. You know, it's like I'll talk to anyone and tell anyone about it, but most people don't have that luxury because they don't have that. They're not wired necessarily the same way. I would be the exception rather than the rule. If I was one of those people, I would have wanted to hear from someone the idea that, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know what's going on in your head. You know, you know, like you would never say to someone, Kenneth, would you ever say to someone, someone with, name an illness, just a physical illness, just name one.
Hepatitis.
Okay. So you would never say to someone who had hepatitis, wow, you know, I know what you're feeling. Wow, that, you know, and they would say to you, well, you know, when did you have hepatitis? You know, was it A, B, or C? You know, like, and you might say, well, I never had hepatitis. Well, they would go, well, how the hell would you know what I feel? Well, if I have depression and you've never had it, I can tell you, you don't know what I'm feeling. So I think telling people you don't know what they feel. I mean, every question that you ask me kind of leads to a million other thoughts, and I got to like cut it off somewhere. But when I think of that, I think of a couple. You have a partner, and your partner is battling depression, and you want to provide the best possible help for them. You want to be the best, bring them the best comfort and the best friendship, the best love that you possibly can. I would say you should tap them on the shoulder tonight. And you should look at them and say, assuming you've never been through what they've gone through, because if you have been through it, then you haven't made those mistakes. But you tap on the shoulder and say, you know, I apologize. I apologize for thinking I knew what you were going through. I just thought because, you know, you have depression, that I've been through it too, and that I understand it, and that it's being sad. But you, and you can feel free to use this. When you tap your partner on the shoulder, you say, watch this guy talk today. And he said words that really have stayed with me. And those words were, my dad died 6 weeks ago. That makes me sad, but it doesn't make me depressed. And the way to distinguish between those two is to understand that depression is not sadness and sadness is not depression. Although some people who have depression are sad, but one does not equal the other. And some people who are sad are depressed. One does not mean the other. I can tell you, I never get sad when I'm depressed. Maybe I'm sad about being depressed, but it's not like one of my symptoms that I have with depression. And if you tap them on the shoulder and say, I thought I understood, and that's why I apologize for making all those stupid suggestions, like we should go for a nice walk, or we should make a list of all the blessings in your life, or maybe you should just suck it up, or hey, if you get out more, or hey, you say to your kids, hey, if you go out with your friends more, you'll feel better. I apologize. I only said those things because I didn't understand what you're going through. And because most of all, I want you to be better. So I think those are really important.
Yeah, you've mentioned how you are pretty at ease with talking to people about your depression. But there's a concern here that someone had asked, like, have you ever faced repercussions for just being too candid about your mental health, you know, at the
Sure.
workplace or public settings or your family? So is this something to be careful about, or how would you handle it? How do you manage that?
Good question. And I think when I'm talking to someone, let's say I was talking to you, Kenneth, about depression, and you said to me, you know, do you think I should be sharing this with people? I would say, well, you know, I can't tell you about your life circumstances. I can't tell you about your relationships. I can't tell you about your boss. You know, like everyone who's ever worked at a company has either experienced it or knows people who have felt like I can't tell my boss about mental illness because they'll see me differently. All of a sudden now I will be perceived in a different way. So I can't tell you about your life circumstances, but I can tell you if you were going to share your illness, and I encourage you to do so, that you need to share it with strength. It's almost like you got to rehearse it, because if you say, if I was telling you, Kenneth, you know, you and I are buds, as we are, I feel a budding friendship happening here. And I say to you, you know, Kenneth, I want to talk to you about something. I don't feel like myself. I don't know why I get like this. I know I have a great life and I shouldn't be like this. And I know it's kind of my fault. Well, that sounds weak. So if I tell you that, and you're not a psychiatrist, you're going to think, yeah, well, you know, he sounds weak, maybe he is weak. But if I say, I want to tell you something and I want you to understand that I can't help this, man, I did not want this. I did not will myself upon this. I cannot will it away, but I have something called depression. And that doesn't mean I'm weak. And that doesn't mean that I've chosen to be this way. It does not mean any of it. It means I'm sick. And because I'm telling you this, you need to understand that I am sick, but I'm not weak. Those words seem to go well together for me. And I think that how you tell people about your illness is really important. And how you see yourself. The stigma is most damaging when it comes to how we see ourselves. You know, somebody else can see me as weak and I go, who cares? But if I see myself as weak, then that makes a big difference in every aspect of how I talk about it. But I don't think I felt repercussions, because when I came out on Off the Record, and I think coming out really is an appropriate way to use a term that obviously has a similar but different meaning to it. When I came out, I was at a point in my career where it didn't matter what my boss thought of me, right? You know, and I was in a career that was judged simply by a number at the end of the day. What were your ratings like for the show? If you come out and say, I have depression, and your ratings are still good, then your boss doesn't care. And if your ratings are bad, then your boss does care, but may not attribute it to the depression. So I never had to I never had to worry about it. And I think for that reason, I'm always careful to tell people, look, I can't tell you what you're going to experience in your life, but what you really need to say without saying these words is, hey, I have depression, and you know what? I don't freaking care what you think. I don't freaking care if you think this makes me weak. I'm sick and I know it, and you don't get a vote. I said freaking because I was warned in advance that, you know, there's a good cross section of people that are watching this. So just so you know, I would have said it a different way.
I wanted to jump in and ask, there's a question, and we're like an hour in and nobody's really mentioned COVID and the huge impacts on people's lives working at home and being at home. So there's a question about whether there's anything you might have done differently in the past year and a half, or that you would change, lessons learned. I think they're referring to the pandemic impact on mental health and wellness.
Well, I would imagine that you and Kenneth, could talk about, with statistics, right? But unfortunately for the two of you, this is my talk, not your talk. But I would say that you would have, I'm kidding, of course, you would have knowledge about, with numbers, that the number of people, I mean, when the Surgeon General in the United States came out and said, almost in these exact words, the mental health crisis for youth in the United States is at a pandemic level. And we, as a society, are not equipped in any way to handle it. That tells me something, pretty profound, because I mean, you can quantify these things. Visits to the ER up dramatically when it comes to, people who don't feel safe with themselves. So I think that there's a magnification of mental illness for people like me who had a pre-existing condition. And there's also the creation of mental illness in people who've been devastated by this. But I think it's also important to distinguish between what is pandemic panic, let's say. Let's just call it that, because as I told you, I love alliterations. Pandemic panic is what happens when you get really worried about your future, and you get really worried about your family member, and you get really worried that you have an immunocompromised kid. That's normal anxiety and a normal reaction. That's not a mental illness. So I try to tell people, like, I talk to schools a lot and want to talk to schools a lot more. But ironically, schools that need it the most are the toughest to crack. It's like, no, we don't want to talk about those things, or we would only have a doctor talk about it. But I think that the idea that all people who are down in the dumps over the pandemic and all people who are anxious about the pandemic. That's not a mental illness. And you need to help people understand what's the difference between the two. And I often say it's about the ability to experience joy. You know, like, I know that you're down in the dumps about the pandemic. We all are. But, you know, if something good happens, can you feel it? And if the answer is no, that's when I say you need to get to a doctor right away, because you've given up your life to the illness. Is that a reasonable answer from a layman?
Thanks, I would say so. I mean, there are also many different experiences depending on whether people are, you know, living alone in a bubble of one, in a kind of home setting, or, you know, haven't been able to travel to see family for a long time. So there's many different twists to that, including employment and impact on work and working from home.
Right, but all of those things would be circumstantial, right? You know, the circumstances of your life have become incredibly difficult, incredibly more difficult than they were before, which can be resolved perhaps by the pandemic resolving itself, but also can be resolved by, you know, by talking about it. Talk therapy. You wouldn't put someone on medication because, you know, they told you, oh, I'm so upset, because if you felt like they weren't suffering from a mental illness, you would encourage them to talk about it and find solutions, if there are any, to their circumstances. Correct?
So some of the links that I put into the chat before are, you know, kind of newly OHIP funded psychotherapy or talk therapy links that didn't exist before COVID. And now there are a number of programs where it's gotten much easier, you know, and psychotherapy doesn't just have to come from a family doctor or a psychiatrist. So there are a lot of other ways that are much easier to access now because of virtual care and talking on screens, which I never did before the last 2 years, and now see a lot of people even further away than Toronto on virtual care, and some of these are now funded with your OHIP card. So that also makes it really good. It's not just for people with an EAP, like, or student health or employee assistance plan, but much more open to the public. So you should check those out.
And like Michael was saying, there are certainly people who are stressed because of the pandemic, but not necessarily depressed. And then there are those who are also truly depressed, as the way you described it, which is why sometimes we call it the shadow pandemic, the mental health issues that is surfacing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like that, the shadow pandemic. Actually, I probably had heard it, but it didn't stick with me, but it really is kind of, you know, but I do think it's important to, you know, for people to distinguish between, hey, I need to get to a doctor right now because I'm, you know, my misery is not just going to go away when the pandemic goes away. And God, I'm so frustrated, you know, I can't go out. I can't, you know, I can't do stuff. That's a logical reaction. To some extent, that's the healthy brain reacting to a shitty situation. Yeah, I said it. I did it. Yeah, I don't feel bad at all.
Say it like it is.
Say it.
Tell it like it is.
I'm just looking. Yeah, go ahead.
Another audience member question. So referring to an author named Dr. Yabko, I may be mispronouncing that, who is a writer, wrote a book on depression. So he apparently insists people who suffer from depression should not drink alcohol with no exceptions. And they're wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I told you before, I stay in my lane. So I'm not going to answer that, but I'm going to answer, well, I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to apply it to myself. And I was, not that the place makes any difference in the circumstance, but I was in England, I guess about 8 years ago for my niece's wedding and in London. And I found that people, this may not be a breaking news story, but a lot of people in England drink a lot of beer. And I'd never been a drinker, never been a self-medicator, maybe because I grew up in a house with my brother who became a famous nephrologist, self-medicating for the same illness that hit me later in life. So I never drank much and my anxiety didn't allow me to, because I would be afraid of the loss of control. But I was a 1 beer guy or a 2 beer guy. And then when we were in England, after about 3 days of having 1 or 2 beers a day, I found myself kind of falling on the as we call it, the Sichter scale. And I realized that, I wasn't doing as well as I had before I got to England and started drinking a couple of drinks a day. And I just said at that moment, never having another drink, nothing's worth it for me. And we all know that alcohol is a depressant. And I would certainly defer to Lisa and Kenneth on this because, as I said, I'm Stan. I talk about what it is I know because I've experienced it. So what do you think, guys?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, 100%. Even though alcohol's impact on everyone is, of course, different, Michael, you're right in saying that it's classified as a depressant because, by and large, it can have a depressant effect, if you will, on people's mood. It certainly, in the immediate term, seems to magnify the emotions you're feeling. Like if you're going out and celebrating with others, your friends, alcohol can elevate your mood, but if you're depressed, it can actually even magnify that depression as well. In addition to other effects on your body, including fragmenting your sleep so that you don't get deep sleep. You might, zone out quicker, but you don't get that deep restorative sleep either with alcohol. So through multiple pathways, alcohol, it's probably not the best idea as a way to treat your depression. And of course, it can itself lead to a separate alcohol use problem, as in becoming addicted to it.
I'll buy all that. Yeah, it's very complicated, right? Because if you took a sip of alcohol and it made you sicker right away, then wouldn't necessarily pose the same risks that it does. But people can feel better, right? In the short term. It's like, yeah. But when you're in pain, you will go for the short term, right? That's addiction to some extent, right? You become addicted to oxy. And you know that it's eventually going to kill you. But when you're in pain, you don't think past the next 10 minutes. You will give up the future or the long-term future for the immediate future. And, someone who's really in mental pain, in depression pain, in anxiety pain, will take that drink because even though they know it's not good and that it's messing up their life, they know that they'll feel better quickly, not for long though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right.
Talk about strategies, maybe healthier coping strategies for yourself. Are there tips about how you manage to, get up and let's say go to work or do what you need to do on those bad days?
For me, I've never really found a trigger for me. I kind of feel like the only trigger for me for severe depression is severe anxiety. And I have triggers for anxiety. I mentioned my daughter I mentioned that I was in Sick Kids, right? And that there was an eye doctor there. My daughter had a severe eye condition. She was diagnosed when she was 3.5. And as a person with anxiety before that never really applied to anything other than my internal thoughts. And as I applied them to me, I couldn't cope. And I just became more and more and more anxious. And in 2008, 11/24/08, the year and a half before that, she had a really tough year. And I was just obsessed with worry. I couldn't focus on anything else. So that for me is kind of what triggers this deep depression, I'm unable to get away from this haunting in my head. But otherwise, I think that there's a sense of self-awareness that as adults, hopefully we get in every aspect of our lives, right? You should learn what you're good at, what makes you happy, and what you're not good at. If you think you're good at everything, you're not very self-aware. But for me, it's also where I can use my brain to make a difference in my day is if I'm having a bad day. Until I learned this, I would make it into a worse day because I would think to myself, okay, well, I'm on medication. Ask me about medication in a second, and I'll give you a fast answer because I know we're running out of time. I'm on medication. I was doing well yesterday, but now I'm not doing well today. And this is what I would say. What happens if I feel the same way tomorrow? Does that mean that my medication is no longer working? Does that mean that I'm now treatment resistant? And I would just be like panicked. And I would wake up the next day going, oh, am I okay? Am I okay? And that's a really hard question to answer, especially, when you've just woken up. So self-awareness, I think, is a really important thing, and understanding not just your illness, but how you cope with your illness. And for me, or don't cope with your illness. I told you to ask me about medication, but I'm going to tell you, excuse me, that I'm not an advocate for meds. I'm an advocate for fighting for your happiness. I'm an advocate for, if you're sick enough that you would say, I will do anything appropriate, right? You know, that's approved, that has been successful for someone. I would do anything to get better. Everything is on the table. And medication is on the table. I mean, how often do we hear from people, I don't believe in meds? I mean, you must hear that all the time. Hey, doc, I feel like I'm dead and like my life is, I'm worthless and my life is no, but I'm not going on medication. Like we all hear that all the time. And I'm sure you hear it. And my answer to that is, okay, you might want to research that a bit, but try something else first, like, hey, if you think there's a better way, I don't want to be on medication. I actually dislike the medication I'm on. Cipralex. Before that, I was on Prozac and Zoloft and Celexa and Effexor and Wellbutrin, which I'm currently on as well. I hate being on meds. It narrows my range of emotion. I live between a 4 and a 7. It does all kinds of things to me that I don't want, but I hate the illness more. I have learned to love the thing that I hate the least. So yeah, I hate being on meds, but I hate the illness more. So that's what you're talking about. Like no one wants chemotherapy for their cancer, right? No one goes, yeah, hey, that'd be great. I'd like to, I like chemotherapy. No, but you put up and you tolerate the feeling that drug, what it does to you, because you hate the drug, but you hate the idea of death more. I hate the medication I'm on, but I hate what I feel when I'm not on medication. And people need to understand that yeah, it's not perfect, but maybe it's better. 228. What are your thoughts?
Do we have time?
Yeah, go ahead. Ask a question. I'll give fast answers.
One more quick question, maybe. So someone's asking about, they were curious about the physical symptoms you experienced from depression.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I doubt people 30 years ago talked about. I doubt psychiatrists. It seems like people are now appreciating that, severe depression can affect more than just your brain, because your brain kind of is the big boss of everything, right? For me, physical symptoms, when I've been at my worst, I had panic attacks, which caused me to have a pain right here, same spot all the time. Just bizarre how it was this specific pain right here. So I would have that. There's a handful of other things, but for the most part, it just took the joy out of my life, or my ability to experience the joy in my life. There's a question here that I think you guys should weigh in on. Because I'm going to give my answer, psychedelics, mushrooms. And I would group that with ketamine and magnetic stimulation and a handful of other things that are not sort of traditional medications. And I would sort of attach that to the idea that you got to fight, and that you got to leave everything on the table. And that, I don't think any doctor is going to put you on ketamine to start with, right? Am I right? Just nod your head, guys. No one's going to say, okay, well, I'm diagnosing you with depression. Let's get you on some ketamine.
Thank you, Michael. I really agree with that. Like you said, change is hope. There's always hope. And if you're stuck with whatever treatment you are having, and if you're stuck, there's always hope to explore. Everything is on the table. That's a very important mindset. Yeah,
it's way more important with depression than it is with, or mental illness. I sort of my fallback is always depression, because you don't want to say in a talk like this, well, if you're experiencing depression, anxiety, or bipolar, or perhaps OCD, I mean, it's too wordy, right? But if one of the symptoms of the illness is lethargy, physical, mental, everything, and when you need to fight to find the next treatment, it's really difficult at that point in your life, because one of the things that has you your illness has you feeling this lack of energy. So I think that's what people like me can do for somebody, you know, like you, not like you, but like you know, who kind of feels like they've had, you know, they've taken a couple of runs at treatment and it hasn't gone well. And then, you know, it's the caregiver or the person that cares about them's job to convince them to give something else a try. Because eventually there's something that is going to work for you. Not 100%, but do you agree with that? That most people, if they keep trying hard enough, you can help them?
Yes, yes, there's always a new path.
I agree with that. Yeah. So I really wanted to give you thanks for this talk, and really thanks to the audience for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. And maybe Ben's also going to remind you or post a link. There's 2 more days of Mindfest ahead, so you're welcome to come back and join us on Monday and Tuesday morning.
Just want to join in this chorus of thanks. You can see Michael in the chat. Everyone has learned a lot from your sharing, and really grateful to your insights. A lot of it is really personal and candid, and really, I think it strikes home with a lot of people who resonated with you in search for a way to articulate these experiences.
I just put my email address. We started with it in there, michael.landsberg@sicknotweek.com. And I'm, you know, if you need that person to talk to, because you heard me say it's not the number of people around us, but understand us. I understand you, but also, you know, like like you just heard me talk, and this is in no way, I'm not boasting. Maybe a little bit of boasting, because I'm, you know, I think I'm good at delivering the information because I spent my life as a broadcaster. All I've really learned how to do is talk. But, you know, people should be like bugging me every single day. Hey, will you talk to our group, our company? Will you talk to our school? And it doesn't have to be me, but you need someone who's able to transfer what they've experienced here and put it into words. So if you want that guy to talk, I find somebody or find me.
So once again, thank you so much. I think, Ben, maybe you will make some comments about the next couple of days and also the evaluation form as well, right?
Yes, indeed. So we have more Mindfest events on Monday and Tuesday. I've pasted the link to the full list of sessions in the chat, and I'll share it again right now. So please take a look. If you're able to, registration is still open for all those events. So please, if you can, join us. We've got a lot more great mental health conversations that will be happening. And we will be sending around an evaluation form as well to all attendees. So please keep an eye on your inbox for that. It's always great to get feedback from our audience so we know what you think of our work and what we can do better. Yeah, so thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.